Chat episode 140. Oh my word, 140. That is absolutely nuts. Yes, so folks, welcome to the Rugby Chat that's now on New Zealand Sports Radio. Now, obviously, the Rugby Chat has been going for what? That must be like 3 years now. Wow. Oh dear me, that's amazing. I think I kicked it off during the Lions tour, doing them as live shows like this. So wow, that's quite a few shows, isn't it, Stephen and John?
Okay, I'll go first because John's not quite, because he's busy eating. I think I can recall doing the first show with you, Paul. Would have been probably a couple of weeks after Auckland won the Mitre 10 Cup back in 2018, if I stand to be corrected. So that would have been a good. What are we now? We're into the 5th month. So probably about a good 16 or 17 months or so. So given that you've already basically done about another a year and a bit since then, no, that's pretty amazing. You've done very, very well. And as I always say, it's a privilege and a pleasure to be on the TDM, I normally say, but part of NZ Sport Radio, even better.
If you finished eating, John, would you like to join us now?
I was ready to go whenever, mate. I'm born ready. But Steve talks so much, I got to let him get some of it out first.
Yeah, but I didn't want you spitting food all over the camera lens. I mean, that would just look disgusting.
Special effects.
Special effects, exactly. So on the show tonight, folks, we're going to be talking predominantly about New Zealand rugby. In fact, probably exclusively about New Zealand rugby. Some of the things we'll be talking about, we'll have a look at the old dollar numbers. Obviously, also have a chat about their discussions they're having around redundancy. There's some good Super Rugby news for us to chat about as well. We might even talk about Super Rugby restructuring as well if we have time. So that's all the kind of stuff that is coming up on the show. John and I, though, we broadcast an interview we did a couple of days ago, which was an absolute cracker, with Dean Kenny earlier, the ex-All Black, he's an All Black. You're always an All Black, aren't you? You're never an ex-All Black. But that was a fun interview, wasn't it, John?
Yeah, it was. He's a real fun guy, Dean, and he's got some great stories, as many rugby players from that era do. I really enjoyed our time together.
So yes, do go back and listen to that. That's on the Long Talk. Also, that's also available as a podcast as well. So if you can either watch us on the Facebook page, or please do go like that and share the video, obviously. Or you can listen to us as a podcast on iHeartRadio, which is Stephen's favorite podcatcher, iTunes, or Spotify as well. Just search for New Zealand Sport Radio, and then John is doing Howl. How are you doing, sir, John?
Howl, yes. Howl. I wanted to say, so Dean gave some really great insights into rugby and the rugby environment in the 1980s in New Zealand, both around the 1981 demo tour, because he made his debut for Otago as a youngster in that 81 season, and he played against the Springboks. He also gave some great stories around what the turmoil in New Zealand rugby later in that era, around 86, the Cavaliers tour, the Rebel tour to South Africa, and also some very interesting insights into the inside of Buck Shelford's scrotum, which he saw from close up in the change room in Nantes. So, if you want to find out what will make a hardened rugby player run to the bathroom to throw up, that's getting wrecked by the French pack. That'll do it.
Well, thank you, John. I'm sure that's the kind of thing that will really make people now go away and listen to it over their breakfast.
Absolutely.
Tomorrow.
Riveting.
And then also hoping to have a chat with Rennie Ranger this week as well. So look out for that one as well. So that's one of the other rugby long talks that is coming up. So let's have a look at some dollar numbers, folks. In last year, New Zealand Rugby had a revenue of 187 million. But even with those numbers, they spent a lot of money, which meant that their cash reserves from 2010, they were at 88.9 million, and then last year they dropped slightly to 86.7 million. Is that the kind of numbers Stephen, what do you think about that? About how how the reserves have actually gone down over the last decade?
Well, the first question I ask myself is, do they have an accountant? For starters, is somebody watching the incoming and the outgoing that comes out of the New Zealand Rugby Union? Because it just seems to me some of that expenditure seems a bit way over the top. We spoke, and I remember we had Mark Watson on a couple of weeks ago, and he spoke about the exorbitant amount of players that they took away to Japan. I think 51 players or so. That wouldn't have been a cheap exercise. So, yeah, to be honest, it's probably nothing that we don't already know, which has pretty much come out in the press in recent times.
The $90 million that they mentioned there, so far as wages, does that include the players?
No.
Well, then
okay,
that's the big question. I mean, that really is the big question. If they are allocating money, and you can see that in their figures, separately to the various unions, then you can't be saying that some of those wages are subsidizing whatever it may be, a development officer or whatever it is in the various unions. So that's wages purely at the head office, and $90 million in wages at the head office. No wonder so many people are being laid off.
Well, let's just run through some of that then, as to what that. So you've jumped onto another number, John, which is that the $94 million is spent in employee benefits. Now, what will that include? That will obviously include the head office people, the CEO, the board, if they get paid. I assume the board get paid, etc. Get paid. It will also include the All Blacks coaching staff.
Yeah,
and it will also include the Super Rugby coaching staff that are paid for by Rugby New Zealand.
Okay.
So Rugby New Zealand do pay for two Super Rugby coaches, 2 coaches per Super Rugby franchise. Okay, and then the other coaches have to be paid for by the rugby by the franchise itself. So, so it will include all those people. As you say, it does not include the 33 million that was given out to the provinces, or 5.3 million to the Heartland Championship provinces, and what, there are 14 Heartland Championship provinces. Stephen, is that right?
Yep.
And
I'm
then
sorry, 13, 27 unions in total. 13.
Okay, so 13. So 13 unions get, or 13 provinces get 5.3 million, and the other 14
spread among them. Spread among them.
Yes.
Yeah.
In total, yeah. So 13 get 5.3. The other 14 get 27.9. So the Mitre 10 Cup provinces get clearly a lot more money than the Heartland Championships, which gives you an idea that if you think that the other unions, that 5.3 million essentially all goes on community rugby, right? There's a small amount that will go on the actual Heartland Championship, but that's amateur. So the Mitre 10 Cup provinces, if you think that they get 27.9 million, so approximately 22.6 or 22.5 million is the price of Mitre 10 Cup rugby. Mitre 10 plus Farah Palmer Cup. The Farah Palmer Cup costs very little.
But of course, they use that money not only in staging the Mitre 10 Cup, they also use that money in their budgets for whatever developmental offices and etc. So they are relying on that input from the national union together with their gate takings and whatever subs they receive from the clubs. So their portion of the club's subs to do the developmental work and to pay something towards referees, or at least covering referees' costs for those who get a bit of petrol money, all that kind of thing. So it's not a huge amount of money.
No, it's not. But it's kind of interesting, isn't it? But basically, something like about 10 or 11 million is how much it costs to run community rugby in New Zealand. That's actually a really, really cheap number, relatively speaking.
Yeah. In terms of Paul, I was going to say, in terms of a a return and investment, it's actually not too bad when you consider some of the players that come out of Mitre 10 Cup and become very, very good professional rugby players.
Oh no, this is excluding Mitre 10 Cup. Mitre 10 Cup is obviously on top of that.
Oh,
I'm saying community, everything except Super Rugby and Mitre 10 Cup rugby costs approximately 11 million.
Yeah, that's a good return investment.
Yeah.
You know, Steve will be able to talk far more about this than I will, even though I have played club rugby at President's Rugby level in the last few years, and would have played again this year if we hadn't been locked down. And my sons have played school and club rugby. That's the rugby. For those of you who are not part of New Zealand or don't live in New Zealand, rugby is such a huge part of New Zealand culture, especially in more rural areas. So there are a lot of rugby clubs, and there's a lot of community involvement, and that's possibly why that figure is low, because there's a huge culture of volunteerism when it comes to involvement in your local rugby club.
Absolutely. Now, John, I would just like to point out here that you just said there that if Stephen could comment more. Now, when you're forgetting here that I do play social touch on a Wednesday with
I'm so sorry.
Don't think I'm not involved in the club scene. Jeez, here you are making it sound like there's that my social touch doesn't count.
I just want to warn you, that bunch of old buggers that you play with is what got me into playing Prezzi's rugby. I went down to that same club, was invited down there to that same practice, and as we were walking off on the first evening, the manager for the Prezzi's rugby sidled up to me and said, "What are you doing on Friday evening?" Right? So just beware.
No, that's fine. Because I've been going for. I was going for until COVID-19 obviously stopped it. I was going for like 2 or 3 months, and no one sidled up to me, which shows you the level of rugby that I play at. That they were like, "God, geez, we don't even want him in. He's not even good enough for presidential rugby." Jeez.
Yeah. Paul, I was going to say, just on what John was commenting about, it's pretty much ingrained in everybody. Like, I'm fortunate enough just to live across the road from Kelston Boys High School, and you could practically wake up first thing in the morning on a Saturday morning, go and watch the juniors play at 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, then your age group school teams, right through to first 15 in the afternoon, without basically having to travel too far. And it's the same with any rugby club that's around. I know we've been talking about the professional game and how all excited we are that it's coming back on June 13. But I'm just waiting to hear when club and community rugby is going to start again. That's what because those are the blokes I can run into John on the sideline, and we can have a good natter about what we're seeing, talk about players, talk about anything, basically anything else but our normal life, and the rugby's just there in front of us. I don't know with Super Rugby or professional rugby. Yeah, you go there as a spectator, you watch, you don't really say a heck of a lot to the person beside you, unless you all feel that excitement. But I think there's something really unique about community rugby, and I can't wait till it comes back. I'm probably more excited about that than I am Super Rugby.
Yeah, Charlie has made a great comment about how many cake stalls, sausage sizzles, which in New Zealand is selling of a particular style of, what would you call it, like a hot dog, and raising money. Well, I'm not trying to go into too much detail. If I describe that pork banger wrapped in a piece of white bread, people won't ever come to New Zealand for a holiday.
So you could have made it sound like gourmet. You're going we have this style of cooking that's sorry, go.
Yeah, I was trying to be deliberately vague. Yeah, but Charlie raises a great point that a lot of money is raised by the families, the parents, the community. Fathers volunteer as managers, as coaches. There's a huge environment of parents involved in coaching, even in school sports, which was very unusual for me when I came here from South Africa, where teachers are trained and taught when they study how to coach various sports, etc. So yeah, it's probably what keeps that value down is how much involvement there is in the community. And we did say, remember, Steve, when we said if some time back we spoke about what you can do for rugby in New Zealand, get involved with your club. Before buying a ticket, and I'm sorry, this is quite brutal towards the professionals, but this is really the most important thing you can do is to go down and instead of buying a ticket to what will be the new Super Rugby franchise, go down and support your local club. Go down and buy these gourmet sausages and and go buy a cake. Go support. Go take your mates down to the local rugby club for a drink rather than somewhere else. But pour money into the local clubs because they are keeping the real heart of the game alive.
Yeah, interesting what you say.
Talk about in there that John mentions. Now we've got an interview coming up on the Long Talk with David Gibson in probably sometime next week. Now, one of the things that him and I discussed was about he's the CEO of North Harbour Rugby, which has obviously got a big South African expat population north of the bridge there. And so I mentioned to him, look, maybe you need to set up a bit like you have London Irish and you have London Welsh over in the UK. They need to have Harbour Box as a rugby club. And he kind of laughed at the idea, but he said, look, that actually the South African community have been very much happy to get engaged and have been very and helping out with the club. So whilst they might not come from a culture of doing that back home, over here they're more than happy. They're some of the first to get on that braai to do that sausage sizzle. Probably at the time crying behind the scenes, going the quality of the sausages. But apart from that, they have been very much getting involved. Now, before I want to get into the provincial rugby, there are some more numbers I want to actually have a look at because there's some particular numbers to me that jump out that look really, really strange. So this isn't a strange. So the total income in 2019 was $187 million. Now, John, you're asking about player wages earlier. So for the Super Rugby, the Super Rugby and the All Blacks, or player wages, actually, I think it might go down to minus 10 cup as well, but 36.5% of player revenue generated gets given to them, player generated revenue, sorry. Now, let's be honest, of that 187 million, pretty much all of it's going to be player generated to a greater or lesser degree. So they're looking at about a third of that, which is what, 60 million is probably around 60 million is allocated to player salaries. To give you an idea, we've said that 33 million goes to the provinces. That gets us to 93 million. And then we have that 94 million on employee benefits. So pretty much half, which gets you up to about 188 million, which is pretty much break even. So that's approximately how the numbers break down. 33 million to provinces, 60 million ish on player wages, and 94 million ish on employee benefits is kind of how the cash breaks down. So if you're Mackenzie coming in going, okay, how do we, because we've already said that the cash reserves are dropping over the last decade. They brought Mackenzie in. So you've got two choices, right? Either revenue goes up or costs go down. And if you're looking at that, the only place where you can either get rid of approximately what, as we said, 22 million-ish, because that's how much minus 10 cup costs. You can cut that, or it's that 94 million that has to be cut, isn't it? That's the only place where there really is space to trim. Now, we'll come on to that in a second because there's been another article about redundancies in New Zealand rugby. But so that total is 187 million income. of which, to give you an idea as to where that comes from, 73%-ish comes from sponsorship and licensing. And then another 57.4 million comes from broadcast, which leaves you with another 57 million from somewhere else, which I'm guessing is gate receipts, hospitality, that kind of stuff. To give you an idea where now, they're suggesting that there'll be a drop in up to 120 million in revenue. 120 million. Now, so 57 million in gate receipts. Yep, I get that goes. Broadcast 57.4 million. Surely that doesn't all go. They've got to keep some of that, or maybe it does if there's no rugby. So that would make up what 114 million. And I guess okay, that kind of then makes sense. Then you got 73 million from sponsorship, which you get anyway whether you play or not. In the short term, in the long term, obviously you'd lose it, but in the short term you do. So I guess that's how that 120 million breaks up. But that seemed to me quite high. Go on, Steve. Go on, John. Sorry.
I just wanted to say, you take that 94 million for salaries and compare that to 60 odd million for the players. And let's just say, Stephen, help me out here. Let's just say the All Black coach gets paid what, $800,000 a year?
Yeah,
$1 million. What would you? What would be a figure on the large side, Stephen?
Oh, pretty much where you are in that ballpark region. I think anything over a half a mil, anything over a half a mil, you're sort of, that's more of your top end players, and of course what happens when those overseas contracts are put in in front of these guys? Then you've got your issues. The New Zealand Rugby Union can't pitch up with any more cash. Hence the deals they come in with sabbaticals and whatnot. I think what I would like to know.
But I'm talking about the coach, Stephen. I'm talking about the coach, the All Black coach. Would you expect the All Black coach, if you consider him as a top executive, right, that might be working in Auckland, where let's say it's 800,000 to $1 million, would that be realistic?
It'd definitely be if you look at it, maybe a big FMG company, I don't know, like Griffins or somebody like that. I would imagine a CEO of that company would be on, at a guess, 250 to 300,000 a year, and then with bonuses on top of that. So I think for our particular market, I think what coaches get paid is a bit exorbitant.
Sorry, no, Stephen, you're way down there. I mean, for example, I was contracting a couple of years ago, and I earned 200,000 as an IT project manager. So they're kind of.
But that's on contract, right? So you've got increased risk. So you've got increased risk there.
Yeah. Oh, true, exactly. But also the CEOs.
So let's just say, gentlemen, I don't want to be caught up. I don't want to be caught up in the too much in the detail. I just want to say this. Let's say, just for ease of maths, let's say the All Black coach gets paid $1 million. Just say, right? And let's say he has how many staff? 15 staff full time that work for him, between physios, assistant coaches, scrum experts, masseuse, baggage handlers, blah 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 blah. Right? Let's say he's got 15 staff, and let's say they all earn. Let's be exorbitant. Let's say they all earn 200,000. That's 1 million for him and 3 million for them, right? So that's only 4 million. And let's say let's say all the coaching staff for all the rugby unions, all the super rugby unions, all get paid the same. So 4 million times 5, that's 24 million, right? So we've got 4 million for the All Black coaching staff, 20 million, 5 times 4, 20 million. So that's 24. Let's make it 25 million. If you take that away from 94 million, you're going to wind up with $69 million. That means there's $9 million being paid to the staff at the headquarters, more than it's being paid to the players. And how many players are there throughout New Zealand? I mean, how many professional players at Super Rugby level and All Black level are being contracted? And you talk about paying more money to the people in the head office than what's being paid there. How can that be?
So yeah, so if we look at this kind of those sort of numbers, so you're looking at what Super Rugby, 5 provinces, about 30 odd players each, right, or 33ish. So you're looking about 150, 160 players at Super Rugby level. So if we say, as you say, if we say around about like there's 20 or 30 people who are coaches in that number for 94 million. New Zealand Rugby apparently has 180 people full-time staff. So that means there's about 150 full-time staff. So basically there's one member of staff per player is kind of how it is kind of how
that's just ridiculous.
Which explains,
it's absolutely ridiculous.
Now, of those 180, according to reports, 90 or half of them are going to be basically at risk of redundancy now. So yeah, which a couple of things here. Now, these are real life people, okay, and it's sad that these real life people will be losing their jobs. We had a discussion a couple of weeks ago where we said, should we actually let rugby burn and rebuild it? And we said no, because of the people cost, right? The personal cost to people will just be horrific. So look, this is going to be really bad and really horrific for those 90 people. Okay, of the remaining 90, some are going to have to reapply for their jobs as well. But approximately 90 people are going to lose their jobs, which is sad. But if we look at it from a business point of view rather than from a personal point of view, which is going to sound cold-hearted, and I know it's going to upset some people. But from a business point of view, we've talked about previously that New Zealand Rugby is stuck in its ways, especially from a media point of view, is overprotective and has got too many people kind of guarding the All Blacks, as it were. This might be a chance for a refresh where actually we see a bit of a culture change around that. We've talked about on the morning sports briefing, there was talk of a company, of an investment company from the States, and I've gone blank as to what they were called now, buying into, or basically buying a percentage of New Zealand Rugby and investing in New Zealand Rugby. Now, that's a very different a culture change for what has been a very traditional organization to be a much more forward, much more dynamic organization. Maybe we're going to see that we are. Maybe this has been a big shake-up in the culture of the organization. For that, I mean, do you think am I being too optimistic from that, or what are your thoughts, Stephen?
Interestingly enough, let's make no bones about it. The New Zealand Rugby Union were in trouble before COVID turned up, and the McKinsey report suggested it. So I think somewhere along the line there were going to be some changes. Silver Light too is the big investment company as well. Thank you for that, Shalia. They were in trouble before all of this happened, and I think before COVID came around, I think they probably looked at as opposed to their staff, they were probably looking at somewhere else where they could trim the fat, and they were looking pretty much at the community game, Mitre 10 Cup. They thought, well, okay, if we can push this to one side, they can probably keep us ticking along for a while. But even somebody like the New Zealand Rugby Union, if you're look, I've heard of really big companies who can make close to $1 billion a year, and for crying out loud, that's what I call a war chest. I know people talk about the New Zealand Rugby Union having that war chest of $90 million, but when that's your staff wages, that's, to me, that's not a war chest. So they were in trouble. So you make a lot of sense, Paul. Yeah, there's going to be some human costs. My real issue is with the previous administration. How did they let it get to this?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of so yes, but when we're talking about previous administration, we're talking Steve Chu, aren't we? Actually, I probably should quickly Google. Stephen, can you quickly Google and see how long he was in charge for? Would be kind of handy. But yeah, we say asleep at the wheel for that decade. And yet, Steve Chu is somebody who was, let's be honest, the image of him in public was that he did a very good job around the finances of New Zealand Rugby and the All Blacks. And yet, when we look at it post, it doesn't look that way. John, from your point of view, you sent me an interesting article around the lack of diversity and the lack of change, actually, before this. So, am I being too overly optimistic on that culture change, or what do you think?
My concern is that you might be a little too optimistic, because let's be honest, you were 100% right. The people that are going to be losing their jobs. Thank you, Simon. I can see there that Steve Chu was in office from 2003 to 2019, so 16 years there. So the people who were employed and are now losing their jobs, they didn't employ themselves. They didn't set the strategy that caused their position to be created, right? So the thing that concerns me is that they talk about cutting half the jobs, but how much change is happening at board level? The people who made the decisions or green lighted the decisions that got the administration to this point. And having done a panel discussion with, and I'm not going to mention a name here, but having done a panel discussion with somebody very, very, very high up at New Zealand Rugby, who prior to us going up on stage and being interviewed and discussing hard topics, said to me, ask me anything, I'm ready, I'm open, we can do it. The first time I asked him something controversial, right, he attacked me like, how could I possibly ask him such a thing? And we were in front of a group of very, very smart investment people who came to me afterwards and astutely said, he never answered your question, right? So there is an environment and a culture that is at the absolute top of the board. And if those people are not changing, why do we expect that the rest of the organization will change?
Yeah, true. And so just so some of you might, I know who John's talking about because I've heard the story several times, and that person is still involved with New Zealand Rugby.
Unnecessary. You could have just said, I've heard the story. You sound like my ex-wife. I've heard it several times.
I can quickly go through the board members. The chair is actually Brent Impey, and he's been on the board since 2012. Richard Delabarca, he was appointed to the board in 2015. Stuart Mitchell appointed to the board in 2012 through 2014. Farrah Palmer, of course, and she's probably just really a recent inductee to the board. Sir Michael James, who was elected to the board in 2018. Sean Nixon, elected to the board in 2019. So there you go. A lot of these guys, also Bill Osborne is on the books, and Max Spence, but a lot of these guys have only been basically elected to the board, you've got to say, bar Brent Impey in recent time, fellas.
Well, I think the thing that concerns me is how many people have been on that board for more than, let's say, 3 years. So anybody who's been on the board from 2016 backwards, that's what would concern me. And how many of those people are not just on the board, but they are in senior positions on the board.
So because one of your points there, John, I mean, so whilst Simon says that Steve Chu's been there since 2003, he has, but he only took over in 2007. And whilst you'll say a lot of those board members, they've only been there since however long, what were they doing before that? How much were they part of it before that? Yeah. So yes, there is definitely an element of we need to have that renewal of pieces. So the article that John is talking about, that I'm talking about, that John sent me, was from RNZ, and it talks about basically. Let's just see if we can see any common themes amongst this. So captains under Steve Hansen, Rich McCaw, Kieran Reid, Sam Kane, Ben Smith, Sam Whitelock, Luke Whitelock. If we look at Ian Foster, and
a lot of whites at lock there.
Well, hang on, I was going to wait. Ian Foster put together his coaching team, and again, John Plumtree, Brad Mora, Scott McLeod, Greg Feek. Yeah, an awful lot of basically white European guys. Now, to be fair to the board, at least we have got Farrah Palmer in there, Michael Jones.
That's great.
We've been trying to talk to for and it was good. Did a good interview on another podcast I listened to recently, who's got involved with New Zealand Rugby, is Ronnie Clark. Very, very, very slowly, we're seeing some sort of Pacifica, some sort of women, some sort of Maori kind of representation at this level, but it really has only happened in the last 2-3 years, and it hasn't filtered down yet into the way that the coaches think. As we can see, all white captains, all white coaching staff. That's definitely the way that it's kind of gone recently. Go on, Stephen.
Paul, one thing that I've always taken on board is the amount of power that All Black coach Steve Hansen has been able to wield almost over the CEO in recent times. If you pretty much think about it, whatever Steve Hansen wants, Steve Hansen gets, and it's pretty much at any cost. And interestingly enough, I've just had a quick look through these board members to see if there was anybody from a banking background. And interestingly enough, Richard Delabarca, his time offshore, 12 years with Kiwi Expac Association Kia. Prior to this, Richard was an investment banker working in both New Zealand and Australia in mergers, acquisitions, and equity capital markets. So, it's not as if they've got some pretty bright people on the board. But once again, I come back to who's running who, because I would suggest to you there was a lot of power wielded by the All Black coach. And sometimes when you're winning, everything seems to be just rosy. It's not until the house of cards fall over then you actually lose. Then all of a sudden, what your equity starts to fall, and questions are asked.
Well, then, and also if we go there, is also who chose Ian Foster to be the next coach. One of the people who was part of that was Ted. So who apparently, if you listen to Rose Robertson, got absolutely grilled by Graham Henry in his interview. Now, so yes, part of that, Steve Hansen, Graham Henry, two guys obviously did a lot of coaching together, a lot of time together. You got to say those. So even though Graham Henry isn't coaching anymore, whenever there's any kind of selection committee put together, he seems to get put on there. I wouldn't be surprised if going forward we see Steve Hansen getting put onto those as well. And you just say, the power behind the throne in those, maybe a couple of those guys that everyone else is just scared to say no to, and which is not a good situation to kind of be in.
What concerns me is how many. It's a little bit better now because Sir Michael Jones, who is such a respected figure in New Zealand, as is Farrah Palmer, are involved on the board level. But if you were to take them out, how many rugby people were on that board? I'm an absolute believer when it comes to administering sport, that the first priority should be the safety of the people who play that sport and the spectators, and the second priority should be the game itself, right? It's
sure,
not money. But
would counter that one by looking
builds?
at look at what a mess. Hang on, John, just quick. I'll come back later to, but look at what a mess something like the players or the ex-captains in Australia are making of things. Who, I'm
no. Hang on a second. It's a proviso. It's a proviso, right? Yep. It's a proviso that somebody who comes onto the board also has some business experience, leadership experience, all of that kind of thing, right? So, I hesitate to say this because it may seem that I keep on harking back to South Africa's problems, but one of the glaring points that stood out in South African rugby over the last 25 years is how great leaders in rugby, who then went on to become great leaders in business, stayed away from rugby administration. They didn't want anything to do with it. And I firmly believe that we've got great leaders in New Zealand who are also successful in business, who could be on that board, rather than people who don't know the game, right? Because the important thing is, if you grow the game, if the game becomes stronger, if the game becomes better, if engagement by people in a game that they love increases, then most times the finances are in a better position. Yes, you need fiscal discipline. Yes, you need to track accounts. Yes, you need to make wise decisions around cash flow, right? Great lesson. Turnover is vanity. Profit is sanity. Cash flow is reality, right? So these are all important things in business that are got to be kept in focus, but they're not at the detriment of the sport itself. Make the game better, and a lot of things. Stephen, what do you agree?
I think so. There's something playing out in my mind, and Paul sort of alluded to it late just recently, where he mentioned in terms of dealing with the New Zealand Rugby Union in and around the media, they're very difficult. They're very protective. I'm going to share a story. I run into an ex-All Black quite a bit. I won't mention his name, but they did an item on the network news a few weeks back where they were basically delivering food parcels out in the community in South Auckland. Now, apparently, the amount of red tape that he had to go through to basically do that particular exercise was quite unbelievable. And they were pretty much told not to comment about rugby getting up and running again. They were told not to comment about the world voting election in and around Bill Bowman. So it gives you a bit of an idea of what the rugby union, what's basically coming out of this conversation, even more than numbers, is that sense of arrogance, entitlement, the fact that when you're winning, you're totally up in the cloud about how things are tracking, and you think to yourself, well, we need to hire a person who's an assistant to this particular person, to this particular job. So all of a sudden, that expenditure that we talk about is actually totally got out of hand. And you talk about the levels of engagement. All of a sudden, you're in trouble. You know what? You don't look at yourselves first of all. I personally think what's coming out of our conversation tonight is there's a real culture issue that flows throughout the offices of the New Zealand Rugby Union. And unfortunately, it started with the previous administration, and I sense there's still a few of those people within the union, and quite frankly, they need to go. And I think the likes of Mark Robinson needs to stamp his own mark right here, right now. And unfortunately, it's, as Paul previously said, first of all, there's gonna be a big human cost. But I hope in terms of rebuilding, they don't forget what this is all about.
Stephen, I don't want to lose what Paul said. Do you feel, when it comes to leadership, at the coaching level in the All Blacks, as well as the leadership of the All Blacks itself, as a person of Maori descent yourself, do you feel that there is enough representation of either Maori or Pacifica background in the leadership?
Listen, I've heard a few horror stories. I know with the agreement with AIG, I think originally they were supposed to get three games a year, but that may have been whittled down to just the two games a year. I know, Māori rugby, it probably gets it's almost like tokenism in my opinion, because there's so many good young Māori players around New Zealand that could be promoted a lot better. But let's keep Māori rugby to the forefront as well. I don't know. Like I say, it depends on this leadership moving forward, being a little bit more open-minded and listening to the stakeholders is a real important one to me.
Boys, I don't know if we're ready to move on from the numbers and to talk about something, but I'm going to finish on one positive around the numbers. Listening to what was supposed to be part of that McKenzie discussion was a reduction and a realignment of provincial rugby, looking at where the cost cutting appears to be now, predominantly around the central budget. Hopefully, there's been a realization of the strength and the importance of provincial and club rugby to the population, and actually hopefully that they don't follow necessarily all the cost cutting at provincial level that McKenzie, I think, had in their report. So hopefully what we're seeing is actually that the provincial unions are being kept relatively ring fenced. I do believe there's going to be some cost cutting there, but hopefully it's being done more central. So
can I ask just one last statement? All right. I personally, my opinion, that a $90-odd million war chest for a company that turns over, what was their turnover? $1 billion?
No. Their income was 187 million.
Okay, so if you have as a war chest one half of your yearly income as a company, that's a very healthy ratio, right? And there is equal. They've dropped from last year to this year. They dropped by 5%, so 89 to 86. That's $3 million drop over 90 million. That's 5%. That's not bad, right? And so to have a war chest of around about 50% of your yearly income, that's quite a positive, right? I wouldn't be happy to see a higher figure than that, because then that would mean you are not taking the money that you're getting in and you're not sending it out, because this is not a for-profit organization. You're not paying shareholders, right? So the money, if you keep on hoarding it, you're actually not spending it to grow the game. So in my opinion, what you see in that figure, I think that's quite healthy.
Yep, understood. Yep, good point. Now, and if you talk to a private financial advisor, he'd suggest you have 3 to 6 months worth of cash savings for issues from a personal level, and similar thing here for professional company as well. 3 to 6 months worth of cash savings to keep you going for the rainy days is big. Pardon me, is a good number. So moving on then, rugby's coming back, guys. It's going to be a good thing, right?
Yes.
We have our first game of rugby is going to be on the 13th, I think it is, or 12th. Is that Saturday or Sunday? So 13th of June. And Neymar Scudder might be playing in that game.
Awesome.
And that's got somewhat I wasn't expecting to see play on these shores again, personally.
Mm-hmm.
Did he not have an injury? Did he not have an injury of some sort, Paul, and has been out of the game for a while?
Yes, he has. I mean, let's be honest, he hasn't really played since the 2015 Rugby World Cup, has he? In all honesty, no. He's had pretty much 4 years of one injury or another, and so he has spent a long time out.
Shoulders.
With that.
Shoulders.
Shoulders. Okay.
Well, he's actually
shoulders are a terrible. They can be a terrible issue. Shoulders, because unlike knees, for instance, which the medical fraternity have really, gone leaps and bounds in treating knees. Shoulders is the most mobile joint in your body. It's the only one that goes through 180 degrees. And in rugby, it's also the one that takes contact. So, yeah, he's had multiple shoulder issues. And he is a player I would pay money to watch.
Oh, great. He's a great player. It's interesting that he's going to be probably joining a team that are probably glad that the season stopped or ceased when it did, because they weren't travelling the best. So the great thing about it, the Highlanders can go away and reload. So we'll see how they get up and running in this particular competition.
Yeah, I guess the problem for the Highlanders is that they've all been kept apart from each other. They've not been able to spend this time actually getting used to playing with each other and training with each other. So, with what have we got? We've got 4 weekends with training starting back on Thursday, and with 4 weekends before the rugby starts. That's a very short pre-season for them to improve that connectivity that I was talking with that interview last week with Simon from Gameline Analytics. I still think they're going to struggle. To my mind,
I'm getting ready.
You're getting ready.
I'm getting ready. I'm getting ready. I'm doing my puff spin. Rugby's coming back.
Highlanders Chiefs, I think, is the opening game, followed by Blues versus the Hurricanes. Bowden Barrett facing his old team. If you're going to set up the draw to have an opening game that everyone's going to want that's going to get a lot of attention, that one's been scheduled by a marketing man, hasn't it?
It's probably the longest wait that we've ever had for a player to debut for a franchise as well. So he'll be jumping out of his skin. And let's not forget the last time that these two teams actually met. It was very controversial. There was a few cards handed out, if I recall. One of the Canes players received a red card. That's a good test for you. Maybe somebody in the chat room can help us out there. I think the Hurricanes may have ended up with 13 players, and they actually did quite well on the night. But it was the Blues that took out the chocolates that particular night. But I suppose the only frustrating thing about it, we're going to be watching a game of rugby, supposedly maybe at Eden Park. Where's this going to be played, Paul?
Well, let's be honest. We're all going to be watching it at home on our sofas anyway, so it doesn't really matter where they play, to be honest. We get to but you're right. The Auckland and the gone blank the Crusaders. So yeah, Blues and Crusaders. Their home Christchurch. I guess what I'm looking for. Those venues have yet to be confirmed. What we should do though is have a quick reminder as to how the table finished. Now, obviously,
let's do that. Let's do that. Who was at the top there, Paul?
The Crusaders that were top, having played 6 games on 23 points.
No, I mean the very top of the whole table.
No, we're only talking New Zealand here.
No, but I think it's only right that you talk about who was at the top of the very top of the top of the top.
The whole table, but they're still in level 4 lockdown. They're not likely to play again this year. So
it's not often that I get to say my team is world champions and my team is top of the Super Rugby table. I just got to take that opportunity when it comes every 12 years or whatever it is, right?
Yep, and I've just got to remove him from the broadcast because we hear this every single week.
Just cut him off.
I'm saving you all, folks. I'm saving you all. Okay, I'll bring him back when he's behaving. There we go. So, of the let's talk about Aotearoa Super Rugby. The way the New Zealand conference finished, we had the Crusaders top, having played 6 games on 23 points. The Blues second on 22 points, having played an extra games. They played 7 games. The Chiefs played 6 games, were on 19 points. 2 points back then, the Hurricanes having played 6 games again, 17 points. And the Highlanders having played 6 games on 7 points. So the top 4 there, all looking pretty competitive, with the Highlanders basically having a tough time of it with just the 1 win in their opening 6 games plus 1 draw against the Jaguares. But yeah, the Chiefs and the Crusaders were the two that really had looked good previously, hadn't they? So this isn't going to be a cakewalk for the Crusaders, I don't think.
Okay, let's say this: if you put a week's salary on one of these teams to win it all, who would it be?
So you want me to put my wins payment down on one of these teams? So I'll put my wins payment on the Crusaders.
Okay, let's pretend we have a week's salary that we can put down. Let's pretend you're still working that 200 G's a year consulting job on contract or whatever it was that you were doing, and you put a week's. Who you putting down, Stephen? Don't vote with your heart. Vote with your head.
Oh, of course. The Crusaders. The Crusaders.
No, I never thought your head was as soft as your heart, mate.
No. They were travelling really well, and I think the break. I know the Chiefs, they showed a couple of frailties here and there, but I just suspect with the break, any players that they had out injured could be back, so it'll be a plus for the Chiefs. I think it'll probably be between the Chiefs and the Crusaders, but common sense tells you the Crusaders. To me, they look like they've got the best all-round team. I'd have to check on the status of David Havili. Are we going to see him back this year?
Probably not, but they've got cover back there, haven't they? Let's be honest.
Yeah, but he was good. He was very good in the first part of the season. But I'm saying that they've got some really good cover. They've got that very good fullback from Will Jordan, I think it is from Tasman. So yeah, they've got some good cover.
No, it's not Michael Jordan. You've been watching too much Last Dance.
What about you, Paul?
Yeah. Look, come on. It's going to be between the Crusaders and the Chiefs. The Chiefs have got Warren Gatland there, who knows how to deliver. He's done it before, and I think part of the reason they got those two losses was rotation to make sure they had all the players all the way through. So I've got to say that yes, but you've got to say, look, the Crusaders have been there, done it for the past 3 years. That's where the safe money is. But I think the Chiefs are in with a shout. The other really positive news, which was hidden at the bottom of the articles, and you had to go hunting for it, was around the Mitre 10 Cup. So the Mitre 10 Cup is going to be a full season. That's right, folks. All 10 rounds during the regular season and also the semi-finals and finals. So the normal 12-week season is going to happen for the Mitre 10 Cup, which is fantastic news. That kicks off on the weekend or on the 11th of September. So that kicks off on a Friday night. So it looks like they're going to be playing Friday, Saturday, Sunday games, maybe not the Thursday games we've had previously, because they've mentioned the Friday kickoff, with the finals being on the weekend of the 28th of November. So basically, they'll wrap up the season just before, but by the end of November, meaning your off season is going to be in December. So slightly later than about a month later than normal, but considering all of the disruptions we've had, that's a pretty good result for provincial for the Mitre 10 Cup, isn't it, guys?
Oh, it'll be excellent. Well, for a couple of reasons. For a while there, I thought we were going to be wrapping up our Christmas presents on the 24th as we're watching the finals, but fortunately, they will wrap up a good month or so earlier. But the great thing about it, when does daylight saving normally kick in? Around about the first week of October, let's. So hopefully the weather will have at least 2 months of great weather. So it'll be interesting to also see the timing as well. Hopefully it's quite a while away, so we'll be back to hopefully somewhere near level 1, or maybe in a situation where we can all collectively go back and watch rugby, and it'll actually be a really great time to go and watch some rugby, and it'll line up with the Northern Hemisphere as well, guys. Just saying.
Sorry, I dropped the ball there. I was so shocked. I was so shocked that the thought of an international aligned rugby season, and I just like, I didn't know what to do with it.
Oh dear. So yes, some positive news to finish on there, folks. Now look, if you're interested in provincial rugby, then look, we've had talks with we had a couple of talks with people from Northland, Bay of Plenty, Tasman, Southland. They're all on the long talk. I've got one coming up with North Harbour. Got a couple more coming up with Northland as well. So do like the page, or subscribe on to the podcast, New Zealand Sports Radio, either iHeartRadio, iTunes, what's the other one, Spotify, or all your favourite podcatchers. Don't miss those. The other thing that we will be doing is Shane will be joining me at 8 p.m. on every Friday to do a Super Rugby preview show. So we'll be previewing all the Super Rugby games. Now, clearly, that's just going to be the New Zealand ones to kick off with. But in July, when the Australian Super Rugby comes back as well, we'll be previewing those games as well. And also, we'll be having a Super Rugby review show for every single round. Haven't sort of figured out yet haven't booked in yet who's going to be hosting and co-hosting and being part of that show. But we'll also have a Super Rugby review show for every round of Super Rugby as well. So don't forget to do all that. Simon Hughes, I don't think we will have developed a vaccine before Mitre 10 Cup. I do think we'll be at level 1 with our borders closed and hopefully with us being able to go to the games. If we do, then you're going to be seeing we'll be trying to get around to as many of the provinces as possible. So last year we went to 23 games across Bay of Plenty, Waikato, Counties Manukau, Auckland, North Harbour, and Northland. Maybe we'll be able to get across a few more this season as well. So that'll be fantastic if we can. Stephen Harris, thank you very much for joining me, sir.
No problems.
John O'Connor, thank you very much for joining me as well. It has been a pleasure as always. Thank you, everybody. Don't forget to join us at 8 a.m. tomorrow morning for the morning sports briefing. That's the last time we'll be at 8 a.m. because when we get to level 2, we're going to move it earlier to 7 a.m. so that you can listen to it on your commute as a podcast. So don't forget to subscribe to that podcast to start your day the best way, up to date with the important sports news.